The first sign was not hunger. It was prayer. Sergeant Valen Korr of the Cadian 88th pressed his boot into the ash of what had once been a shrine world, and his vox crackle caught something that made his blood ice over. Not screaming. Not the wet tearing of biomass being harvested. Singing. Thousands of voices, human voices, lifting in unison toward the sky where the Hive fleet hung like a bruise across the stars. He turned to his squad, their lasguns raised, their faces pale beneath rebreather masks, and he saw it in their eyes too, the wrongness, the thing that should not be. The Tyranids had returned to Septimus Vigil, but they had not come to feed. Korr had fought the Great Devourer before. He knew the patterns, the skittering of hormagaunts across hab-block walls, the wet crunch of carnifex claws through rockcrete, the silent, inexorable advance of the swarm that thought with one mind and consumed with a billion mouths. He had seen men dissolve in digestive pools, watched friends torn apart and rendered into genetic slurry to fuel the next wave. He understood that horror. It was straightforward. It was honest. This was something else entirely. The city ahead still stood. Spires rose intact against the poisoned sky. Power still flickered in the windows. The Imperial Aquila still adorned the central cathedral, though something had been painted across it, something that writhed. Korr ordered his squad forward, their boots crunching through a carpet of organic matter that pulsed faintly, like skin. The air tasted of copper and something sweeter, floral, almost. His stomach turned. They found the first body 3 blocks in. A woman, middle-aged, wearing the robes of a mid-level administratum clerk. She lay on her back in the street, arms spread wide, face turned upward. Her eyes were gone, not torn out, grown over. Chitin covered the sockets in smooth, iridescent plates that reflected the dim light in colors that had no name. Her mouth hung open, and from it grew a single tendril, thin as hair, that stretched upward and disappeared into the smog above. She was smiling. Korr knelt beside her, forcing himself to look closely. No wounds. No signs of struggle. The flesh around the chitin growths was smooth, almost seamlessly integrated. He had seen genestealer cult mutations before, the slow corruption of human tissue into something xenos, but this was different. This looked voluntary. This looked like a gift received and accepted. His vox clicked. Private Mensk, 2 blocks east. Sergeant, you need to see this. Korr found him standing at the edge of the central plaza, frozen, his lasgun dangling from one hand. The plaza stretched before them, a space designed to hold 20,000 souls during Imperial feast days. It held more than that now. Bodies covered every meter of stone, thousands of them. Men, women, children, all arranged in concentric circles around a central mass that rose like a tumor from the ground. They lay on their backs, faces upward, and every one of them had been changed. Chitin plates, tendrils, bony protrusions that grew from spines and rib cages in configurations that almost looked decorative. Beautiful, even, in a way that made Korr want to vomit. The central mass pulsed. It was perhaps 10 meters high, a mound of flesh and bone and something else, something that gleamed wetly in the half-light. Korr realized with mounting horror that it was still growing. He could see the process. Bodies at the edge of the pile twitched, their flesh rippled. Slowly, incrementally, they were being absorbed into the structure, their biomass feeding its expansion. But they were not dead. He could see eyes moving beneath translucent membranes, mouths working soundlessly, hands clenching and unclenching in rhythm with the mass's pulse. Mensk turned to him, his face gray. "What is it?" Korr did not answer. He did not have an answer. The singing started again. It came from everywhere and nowhere, a $it sound that bypassed his ears and resonated directly in his skull. Not high Gothic, not any language he recognized, but he understood it anyway. He understood it in his bones, in the deep places where instinct lived. It was a hymn, a prayer of gratitude, of surrender, of love. He raised his lasgun toward the central mass and squeezed the trigger. The last bolt struck true, punching a smoking crater into the wet flesh. The mass shuddered. The singing stopped. For 3 heartbeats, silence held the plaza like a drawn breath. Then the bodies moved. Not all of them. Just those nearest the central mass. They rose in fluid, jointless motions, their changed bodies bending in ways human spines should not allow. They turned to face Korr's squad, their eyeless faces tilted, as if listening, as if curious. One of them, a man whose torso had split open to reveal a cavity filled with pulsing organs that were definitely not human, took a step forward. Then another. His mouth opened, and the singing resumed, pouring from his throat, in a voice that held harmonics no human vocal cords could produce. The others joined him, a choir of the transformed. They did not attack. They advanced slowly, hands outstretched, as if offering embrace. Korr shouted the order to fire. Las bolts filled the plaza with crackling light, punching through the advancing forms, dropping them in smoking heaps. But they kept coming. More rose from the circles, more and more. The squad's fire discipline broke. Men screamed and ran. Korr stood his ground, firing until his power pack ran dry, then drew his combat knife and prepared to die like a Cadian should. The transformed stopped 3 meters away. They stood in a semicircle around him, swaying slightly, their ruined faces all turned in his direction. The singing softened to a murmur. One of them, a woman whose skull had elongated into a crest of bone that resembled a Tyranid synapse creature's crown, stepped closer. She reached out with a hand that ended in too many fingers. She touched his cheek. Her skin was warm, soft, almost gentle. She spoke. The words came in high Gothic, clear and precise, despite the changes to her throat. Why do you hurt yourself with fear? Why do you cling to the lie of separation? We are here. We have come. We are the answer to every prayer your species has screamed into the void. Join us. Feel what we feel. Know what we know. Become more than you are. Korr drove his knife into her throat. She stumbled back, black ichor pumping from the wound, but she did not fall. She did not even seem angry. She looked at him with something that might have been pity. Then she turned and walked back to the central mass. The others followed. They lay down in the circles once more, resuming their positions, and the singing rose again to fill the dying city. Korr ran. He did not remember the route back to the extraction point. His squad was gone. Dead or scattered or worse. He found the Chimera transport where they had left it, climbed inside, and triggered the Vox to command frequency. His hands shook so badly he could barely key in the correct codes. When the response came, it was Major Thesson's voice, clipped and professional. "Report, Sergeant." Korr tried to speak. His throat would not work. He forced the words out one at a time. The city is lost. The people are. They are changed. The Tyranids have done something. They are not consuming. They are converting. Request immediate orbital bombardment. Level everything. Burn it all. Static crackled. Then Thesson's voice returned, but it sounded different, softer, almost dreamlike. "No need for that, Sergeant. We understand now. We have been blessed. Come back to camp. You will see. You will understand. It is beautiful. It is peace." The Vox went dead. Korr sat in the transport's crew compartment, staring at the dead handset, and he understood with perfect clarity that he was alone. That whatever had happened here had already spread, beyond this city, beyond this world, perhaps. He thought about driving the Chimera into the nearest manufactorum and detonating its fuel cells. Quick, clean, a soldier's death. But his hands would not obey. He found himself thinking about the woman's touch, the warmth of it, the gentleness, the way she had looked at him with something that might have been love. He thought about the singing, how it had made him feel, underneath the horror, safe, wanted, part of something vast and eternal. He started the engine and drove toward the camp. He did not know why. He did not want to know why. The infection, if it could be called that, spread with a speed that defied conventional understanding. Within 3 weeks, Septimus Vigil was declared a dead world by the Administratum, its tithes suspended, its astropathic choir silent. But no war fleets came to cleanse it. No exterminatus order was issued. The sector command claimed they were gathering intelligence, preparing a response. But the weeks turned to months, and no response came. Because the response was already inside the fleet, inside the command structures, inside the minds of those who should have been organizing resistance. Inquisitor Xeris of the Ordo Xenos first learned of the phenomenon when a routine interrogation of a captured Genestealer cultist went catastrophically wrong. The cultist, a third-generation hybrid with obvious xenos taint, had been secured in a null-field cell designed to prevent psychic influence. Standard procedure. Xeris had conducted hundreds of such interrogations. He knew the patterns. The fanatical devotion to the Star Children, the garbled promises of ascension, the genetic imperative that made them love their inhuman progenitors with the force of instinct. This cultist was different. When questioned about his cult's activities, he smiled. Not the manic grin of the fanatic, but something gentler, almost serene. He spoke about the coming of the four-armed emperor not with fear or ecstasy, but with simple, quiet certainty, as if describing an inevitable sunrise. "You misunderstand what we are," the cultist said. His voice was calm, reasonable. "We are not slaves to instinct. We are not puppets dancing on genetic strings. We are children welcoming our parent. We are fragments recognizing the whole. When the fleet arrives, when the sky fills with living ships and the ground shakes with their landing, we will not be consumed. We will be embraced. We will become part of something that thinks in symphonies and dreams in light years. And you will too. Everyone will. Because the hive mind is evolving. It is learning. It has tasted our thoughts and found them interesting." Xeris activated the cell's neural disruptor, flooding the space with electromagnetic pulses designed to scramble synaptic activity. The cultist convulsed, foam flecking his lips, but he kept talking. The words came in fragments now, disjointed, but clear enough. Not just hunger. Anymore. Learn to love. Learn to want to be loved. Gods are born from belief, and we believe, we believe, we believe. The cultist died mid-sentence, his brain finally succumbing to the disruptor's assault. Xeris stood alone in the interrogation chamber, staring at the corpse, and felt something he had not felt in 40 years of service to the Golden Throne. Uncertainty. True. Existential uncertainty about whether the tools he possessed were sufficient for the threat before him. He spent the next 6 weeks pursuing rumors, whispers, half-confirmed reports from frontier worlds that told stories matching the pattern from Septimus Vigil, Tyranid fleets that arrived but did not immediately attack, human populations that welcomed them, cities that transformed into something between hive and temple. And always, always, the singing. The prayers, the worship. One report came from a missionary who had been conducting conversions on the agri-world of Talon's Reach when the Hive fleet arrived. She had escaped in the initial chaos and made it to an orbital station before it fell. Her testimony, recorded by a servitor before she succumbed to her injuries, painted a picture that haunted Xeris's thoughts. The sky opened. She had whispered, her voice barely audible. Spores fell like snow. We thought it was the end. We prepared to die. But the spores did not kill. They sang. Beautiful, terrible songs in no language and every language. And the people listened. They breathed deeply. They smiled. I saw the governor walk out into the falling spores, with his arms spread wide, tears streaming down his face, saying, "Finally, finally, finally." I saw priests of the Ministorum throw down their icons and kneel. I saw children laugh and dance as tendrils grew from their spines. And I wanted to join them. Emperor, forgive me. I wanted to feel what they felt. I ran only because my augmetic leg malfunctioned, only because I stumbled and the moment passed. But I still hear the singing, even now, even as I die. And it sounds like home. Xeris compiled his findings into a data slate and transmitted it directly to the Ordo Xenos conclave on Scintilla. He received a response within 3 days, a single-line text transmission. Assets inbound, maintain silence. Await instruction. The assets arrived as a kill team of Deathwatch Space Marines, 8 warriors in black armor adorned with the marks of their original chapters. Their leader, a sergeant bearing the symbol of the Imperial Fists, introduced himself as Brother Sergeant Korr. He read Xeris's report in silence, then looked up with eyes that held no warmth. "We have encountered this phenomenon on 3 other worlds," Korr said. "Each time, we arrived too late. The population was already lost, transformed. They fought us not with the mindless fury of Tyranid organisms, but with coordination, tactics. They used weapons, they spoke, they tried to convert us." He paused, his jaw tightening. "One of my brothers fell, not to their weapons, to their words." He removed his helmet to see them more clearly, to hear their arguments. Within an hour, he was weeping and speaking of the beauty of unity. "We executed him ourselves. There was no other choice." Xeris felt his throat constrict. "You are saying this is a psychic attack? Something the Hive Mind has weaponized?" Korr shook his head slowly. "I am saying it is worse than that. This is not an attack, this is seduction. The Hive Mind has learned something from us. From all the species it has consumed. It has learned that sentient beings do not only fear the predator, they worship it. They build religions around it. They give it power not through violence, but through belief. And now it is using that, refining it, becoming what we have always prayed for in our darkest moments, a god that actually answers." The kill team deployed to the frontier world of Ghast's Landing, where reports indicated a Tyranid splinter fleet had made planetfall 2 months prior. Intelligence suggested the world still had functional infrastructure and a sizable human population. The perfect site for investigation and, if necessary, purging. Xeris accompanied them, along with a retinue of hand-picked operatives whose loyalty and mental fortitude had been tested to extremes. They made landfall in a Thunderhawk, descending through a sky that looked wrong. The clouds moved in spiral patterns, too regular to be natural. The colors were off. Purples and greens where there should have been gray and white. The Thunderhawk's auger arrays screamed warnings about biological contamination, but the readings made no sense. Toxicity levels within human survivable ranges. Air pressure normal. Gravity normal. But something in the data refused to cohere into a recognizable pattern. The city they chose as their insertion point was called New Helveston. Population 7 million. Primary industries, ore processing, and food production. Standard, imperial architecture. A cathedral, 3 administratum complexes, and precisely 1 statue of the emperor per district. The records showed a thriving, if unremarkable, example of baseline human civilization. What they found when they emerged from the Thunderhawk was a place that should not exist. The buildings stood intact, but they had been modified. Organic matter grew from their walls in intricate patterns, like decorative filigree, pulsing faintly with bioluminescence. The streets were clean. Not empty. Clean. No bodies. No rubble. No signs of battle. But everywhere, there were the changed ones. People moving through the city on their daily business, wearing the mutations like fashion. A dockworker with carapace plating across his shoulders that resembled worked bronze. A child with compound eyes that gleamed like cut gems. An administratum scribe whose fingers had elongated into delicate tendrils that danced across a data slate with inhuman precision. They did not react to the kill team's arrival with fear. They looked up. They smiled. They waved. Korr's voice came harsh over the vox. "Stay tight. Weapons ready. Do not engage unless engaged. We are here to observe." They moved deeper into the city, and Xeris felt his mind struggling to process what he saw. This was not a conquered population. This was not even a converted population in the way Genestealer cults converted. These people were happy. Genuinely, obviously happy. He saw families walking together, the parents holding children whose bodies were a fusion of human and Tyranid biology. He saw markets where goods were still being traded, though the merchants bore changes that would have marked them for execution on any sane imperial world. He saw a church, and through its open doors he could hear singing. He almost recognized the hymn. It was an old ecclesiarchy standard, one that praised the Emperor's eternal vigilance. But the words had changed. Instead of the Emperor, they sang to the great unity, to the symphony of flesh, to the all-consuming love. A priest stood at the church's entrance, his robes modified to accommodate the chitinous growth that had replaced his lower spine. He saw the kill team and his face lit with genuine joy. He hurried toward them, hands spread in welcome. "Brothers, oh, blessed day, you have come to witness. Please, please, enter. Let us share the revelation with you. Let us show you what we have learned. There is no need for those weapons, no need for fear. We are all children of the same great truth now." Brother Corvin raised his bolter. The priest stopped, but his smile never wavered. "I see," the priest said gently. "You are not ready. That is well. Readiness cannot be forced. But know that you are welcome here, always welcome. When the fear passes, when the questions become too loud to ignore, come back. We will be waiting. The unity is patient. The unity loves even those who strike at it, especially those, because they hurt themselves more than they hurt the whole." Corvin fired. The bolt round struck the priest in the center of his chest and detonated, tearing him apart in a spray of blood and shattered bone. The kill team moved past the corpse and continued into the city center. Behind them, Xeris heard screaming. He turned and saw the changed ones emerging from buildings, running toward the priest's body. But not with rage, with grief. They knelt around the remains, their modified hands reaching out to touch the blood, and they wept. They wept like mourners at a funeral, like children who had lost a beloved parent. One of them, a woman whose arms had fused into a single limb ending in a cluster of sensory tendrils, looked up at the retreating kill team. She did not curse them. She did not threaten. She simply said, in a voice thick with tears, "He forgives you. We forgive you. Please, please understand. We only want to help you become whole." Xeris realized he was crying. He did not know when it had started. He wiped his eyes roughly and forced himself to keep moving. They reached the city center by nightfall. The central square had been transformed into something that made Xeris's mind rebel against comprehension. The governor's palace, a squat ferrocrete structure that had stood for 3,000 years, was now encased in what could only be described as a living cathedral. Bone and flesh, and something that gleamed like mother of pearl had grown around and through it, forming arches and columns and vaulted spaces that soared toward the darkening sky. Light emanated from within, not the harsh electric glare of imperial illumination, but a soft, shifting radiance in colors that had no names. At the cathedral's heart stood something Xeris recognized from nightmare briefings and proscribed texts. A Norn queen, the massive Tyranid bioform that served as the fleet's reproductive nexus. Except this one was different. It had been decorated, adorned. Thousands of human hands had covered its chitinous hide with carvings and paintings and offerings of precious metals. They had woven its tendrils with flowers. They had set gems into its carapace. They had made it beautiful. And around it, hundreds of the changed ones knelt in prayer. Brother Corvin stared at the scene for a long moment. Then he activated the Vox to the Thunderhawk. Orbital strike. These coordinates. Maximum yield. Authorization Corvan 9 Sigma Terminus. The response came immediately. Acknowledged. Payload inbound. 30 seconds. Corvan turned to his kill team. Fall back. Full speed. We have half a minute to reach minimum safe distance. They ran. Xeris, for all his augmentations and combat conditioning, struggled to keep pace with the Space Marine's superhuman strides. Behind them, the changed ones seemed to sense what was coming. They did not flee. They stood and turned their faces skyward, arms spread, singing. The lance strike hit with the force of a small sun. The cathedral, the Norn Queen, the changed ones, everything within a 3-kilometer radius, vaporized instantly. The shockwave caught the kill team mid-stride and hurled them like toys. Xeris felt his ribs crack as he struck the ground. His vision whited out. When it returned, he was lying in a crater, his body screaming agony, staring up at a pillar of fire that reached toward the clouds. Hands pulled him upright. Brother Corvan, his armor scorched but intact. Move, Inquisitor. The site is not secure. We have confirmation of additional biomass approaching from the east. Thousands of them. We need to extract now. They made it back to the Thunderhawk with minutes to spare. As the craft lifted off, Xeris looked down at New Helverston and saw them coming. Wave after wave of the changed ones, pouring from every street and building, converging on the crater where their cathedral had stood. But they were not attacking, they were rebuilding. Already, he could see biomatter flowing from their bodies, knitting together, forming new structures, regrowing what had been destroyed. And they were still singing. Corvan's voice was hollow. It does not matter how many we kill. They do not fear death. They welcome it, because death means being absorbed into the hive mind completely. It means union with their god. We cannot win this war with violence. Xeris closed his eyes and tried to think. Tried to find some angle, some strategy, some doctrine that addressed this. But the Ordo Xenos had trained him to fight invaders, predators, alien horrors that wanted to destroy humanity, not seduce it, not love it to death. What do we tell the Conclave? He asked. Corvan was silent for a long time. Then, the truth, that the galaxy has changed, that the Tyranids have learned the most dangerous lesson any species can learn. They have learned to make themselves into gods. And gods, Inquisitor, are very difficult to kill, because you cannot execute an idea, you cannot bomb a belief, and you cannot make a martyr of someone who has already won by dying. The Thunderhawk broke atmosphere and accelerated toward the waiting strike cruiser. Behind them, Ghast's landing turned slowly in the void, its surface now visible from orbit as a patchwork of organic growth and human settlement, fused together in patterns that almost looked intentional. Beautiful, even. Xeris opened his eyes and stared at it. And he wondered, in the deepest part of his soul where even the Emperor's light struggled to reach, what it would feel like to stop fighting, to surrender, to feel that certainty the changed ones felt, to be part of something vast and eternal and utterly, perfectly sure of itself. He forced the thought down, locked it away, but it did not disappear. It whispered, it waited, and across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 hearts, it was whispering the same thing. The Conclave received Xeris's report with the cold professionalism expected of the Ordo Xenos. They asked clarifying questions. They reviewed the vid captures and bioscan data. They consulted with genitor magi of the Adeptus Mechanicus and sanctioned psychers trained to analyze xenos phenomena. The conclusion, when it came, was delivered by Inquisitor Lord Vane, a woman whose face was more scar tissue than flesh, whose eyes had seen things that would break lesser minds. "We are facing an unprecedented threat," Vane said, her voice flat and mechanical through her augmetic vox grill. "The Tyranids have always represented an existential danger to humanity. But they were a danger we understood. Biological weapons, adaptive predators. We have doctrines for that. We have strategies. What you have documented, Inquisitor Xeris, is something else entirely. This is not invasion. This is apotheosis. The hive mind has begun to transcend its original purpose. It is no longer merely consuming biomass for sustenance. It is harvesting belief, worship, emotional resonance, and it is using that to become something we have no framework for combating." She paused, and Xeris saw something in her scarred face that chilled him more than anything he had witnessed on Ghast's landing. Uncertainty. Raw, unfiltered uncertainty. "The Mechanicus has a theory," Vane continued. "They believe the hive mind has consumed enough psychically active species that it has begun to manifest in the warp. Not fully. Not yet. But there are indications. Astropaths report new presences in the Imperium, entities that feel both utterly alien and strangely familiar. One described it as the voice of hunger, learning to sing lullabies. Another went catatonic after exposure and had to be euthanized. Before she died, she kept repeating 4 words. They love us now." A janitor magos attending the meeting, his form more machine than flesh, added his observations in Binheric cant that was translated by a servitor. Analysis of the biosamples from New Helveston reveals genetic alterations that should not be viable. Human and Tyranid DNA do not hybridize naturally. The rejection cascade alone should kill any organism attempting such fusion within hours. Yet these subjects were alive, functional, thriving. The only explanation is that something is actively maintaining the hybrid state. Something with understanding of both genomes at a level that suggests awareness, intention, artistry, even. Xeris spoke for the first time. Can we cleanse the affected worlds? Virus bombs? Cyclonic torpedoes? Complete eradication? Vane's expression did not change. We have tried. 6 worlds have been subjected to exterminatus protocols in the past 2 months. Total surface elimination. Atmospheric ignition. In each case, we waited the standard century before attempting resurvey. 3 of those worlds show signs of life returning. Not native life, the changed ones. Somehow, they survived. Deep underground, we assume. In places even virus bombs could not reach. And now they are rebuilding. Slowly, but inexorably. Then what do we do? The question hung in the air like a curse. No one answered immediately. These were people who had dedicated their lives to humanity's survival, who had made decisions that cost billions of lives without hesitation because those decisions were necessary. But now, faced with a threat that ate civilizations from the inside and made them love their own consumption, they had no answer. Finally, an ancient Inquisitor at the far end of the table spoke. His name was Chevak, and he was older than anyone had right to be. Sustained by rejuvenate treatments and sheer bloody-minded refusal to die. He had fought in the Macarian Crusade. He had walked the webway. He had seen things that would justify 100 exterminatus orders. We do what we have always done when faced with threats beyond our ability to eliminate, Chevak said, his voice a dry rasp. We contain, we quarantine, we establish cordons sanitaire around affected systems, and we enforce it with absolute lethality. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. We buy time. And we pray that someone, somewhere, finds a solution before the infection spreads beyond our ability to contain it. Vane nodded slowly. Agreed. I will present the recommendation to the High Lords. Inquisitor Xeris, you will lead the containment effort. Full authority, unlimited resources. Any ship that attempts to breach the quarantine line dies. Any astropath who reports infection dies. Any world that shows signs of conversion is marked for delayed exterminatus pending development of effective sterilization protocols. This is now the Imperium's highest priority. Xeris felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders like a shroud. And what do we tell the populations? The Imperial Guard regiments stationed in the quarantine zone? They will ask questions. They will want to know why we are abandoning entire sectors. Xeris laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. We tell them the truth, partially. We tell them a new strain of the Tyranid threat has emerged, one that corrupts through mental influence, one that requires extreme caution and isolation protocols. We do not tell them about the worship, about the gods, about the fact that their enemy now offers them something the Imperium never has, the promise of understanding, of belonging, of an end to fear. That is not enough. No. Xevak's smile was terrible. It is not. But it is all we have. Welcome to the new war, Inquisitor. Where the battlefield is not space or terror, but the human heart. And we are very badly equipped for that fight. The conclave adjourned. Xeris spent the next 3 days reviewing troop deployments, establishing communication protocols, and drafting the 1,000 administrative documents necessary to turn a sector of space into a prison. He worked without sleep, driven by something he refused to name. Fear, not of the Tyranids, of himself, of the thought that kept returning no matter how hard he pushed it away. What if they are right? What if unity, even purchased at the cost of individual humanity, is better than this? Better than 10,000 years of grinding war? Better than watching children starve because their world's tithe demands they give every scrap of food to the administratum? Better than condemning billions to lives of industrial servitude because the Imperium needs their labor more than it needs their happiness? He purged the thought with pain, activated the discipline electrodes implanted beneath his skin, and shocked himself until his vision grayed and his hands shook. But the thought did not die. It retreated. It waited. And he knew, with the certainty of a man who had looked into too many abysses, that it would return. The quarantine line was established within a month. 12 fleet battle groups, 300 ships of the Imperial Navy, formed a sphere around the affected sectors. Orders were clear. Anything attempting to leave was to be destroyed without communication or warning. No exceptions. No appeals. The ship's crews were told they were preventing a xenos plague. Technically true. They were not told about the singing. Xeris took command from the bridge of the battlecruiser Righteous Fury, a vessel old enough to have fought at Calth, scarred by 10,000 battles, consecrated by the blood of saints. Its captain, a woman named Septimus, who had spent 40 years in the void, gave him a tour of the ship as a formality. They ended in the observation dome, staring out at the distant stars that marked the quarantine zone's inner boundary. "How long do you think we can hold this line?" Septimus asked quietly. Xeris did not answer immediately. He watched the stars and thought about all the people beneath them. Trillions of human souls, living their lives, unaware that their section of the galaxy had been declared a lost cause, unaware that the Imperium had written them off as acceptable losses. "As long as we have to," he finally said. "That is not an answer. No, it is not. But it is all I have." Septimus turned to face him. "I served on a ship that patrolled a Death World quarantine once. Kept raiders and smugglers from landing on a planet that was being held in reserve for future colonization. We held that line for 6 years, lost 3 ships to pirates, lost another 2 to warp storms. And at the end of 6 years, we learned the planet had been reclassified and given to a navigator house as payment for some political debt. Everything we did, everyone who died. Meaningless." Xeris met her eyes. "Are you asking me if this is different?" "I am asking you if you believe it is." He considered lying. Decided against it. "I do not know. I know that what is happening in there is the worst threat I have seen in my career. I know that it must be stopped. I know that we are buying time for a solution we do not yet have. Beyond that, I have faith. Not certainty, just faith. It will have to be enough." Septimus smiled without humor. "Faith, the last refuge of the desperate. Very well, Inquisitor. We will hold this line. And when the singing starts, because it will start, when our crew begins to hear it in their dreams and ask questions we cannot answer, we will hold the line anyway, because that is what we do. That is all we do." The first breach attempt came 3 weeks later. A civilian transport, fleeing from the interior of the quarantine zone, accelerating hard toward the line. Xeris received the alert in his quarters and was on the bridge within minutes. The transport was broadcasting distress signals on all Imperial frequencies. The message was automated, looping, desperate. "This is the merchant vessel Prosperity's Dawn out of Talasar. We are carrying 5,000 refugees. Civilian population fleeing xenos incursion. Request immediate asylum and medical assistance. Please respond. Please. We have children aboard. We have wounded. In the Emperor's name, please respond." Septimus looked at Xeris. "Orders." He stared at the tactical display. The transport was old, slow, unarmed. 5,000 people. Children. The easy thing, the merciful thing, would be to grant them passage, to allow them through the line and sort them in quarantine facilities behind Imperial territory, standard refugee protocol. He had supervised dozens of such operations, but he had also read the reports from the other breaches, the ones that had been allowed through on other sectors before the full nature of the threat was understood. Every single refugee ship that had docked at an Imperial facility became a vector, not through violence, through conversation. Through the simple act of the changed ones speaking to the unchanged and sharing what they had learned, sharing what they had felt. One ship had docked at a Navy resupply station with 300 refugees. Within a week, the station's crew of 10,000 was singing the hymns. Within 2 weeks, The station had to be destroyed from orbit. The refugees had not fought. They had simply talked about peace, about unity, about the end of fear, and people had listened. Xeris activated the command vox. His voice was steady. Merchant vessel Prosperity's Dawn. This is Inquisitorial authority. You are ordered to halt your approach immediately and await inspection. Failure to comply will result in your destruction. Acknowledge. The response came within seconds. A human voice, male, middle-aged, thick with exhaustion and desperation. Please, we cannot stop. Our engines are damaged. We are on emergency power only. We are just trying to reach safety. We have done nothing wrong. We are loyal servants of the Emperor. Please, you must help us. Halt your approach. Final warning. We cannot. Listen to me, please. You do not understand what is happening back there. The cities are changing. The people are changing. But we escaped. We stayed pure. We did not listen to the singing. We kept faith. We deserve sanctuary. We earned. For the love of terror, we have children. Xeris cut the transmission. He looked at Sethis. Fire. She hesitated for less than a heartbeat. Then her hand moved to the weapons console. Lance batteries, target locked. Firing. The Righteous Fury's primary lance weapon discharged with a sound like reality tearing. A beam of coherent energy crossed the void in microseconds and struck the Prosperity's Dawn amidships. The transport came apart like paper, its hull rupturing, its atmosphere venting in crystalline clouds, its 5,000 souls vaporizing in superheated plasma. The debris field expanded slowly, glittering in the light of distant stars, and then the void was empty again. Silent, clean, absolutely final. Xeris stood motionless, staring at where the transport had been. He had killed people before, thousands, tens of thousands, entire populations when necessary. But those deaths had been for clear reasons. Heresy, corruption, xenos taint. This was different. These people had asked for help. They had claimed loyalty. They had children, and he had killed them because he could not risk believing them. Sethi spoke quietly. First breach logged and resolved. Debris field is dispersing within acceptable parameters. No additional contacts detected. Xeris nodded. He did not trust his voice. Over the following months, 17 more breach attempts occurred. Transports, cargo haulers. One Navy frigate whose captain claimed his ship was undamaged and his crew unaffected, demanding passage to report to Sector Command. Xeris destroyed them all. Each time, he listened to their pleas, their promises, their desperate assertions of loyalty. Each time, he gave the order. Each time, Captain Sethis fired without hesitation. The crew began to notice. Whispers spread through the ship. Why were they killing refugees? Why no inspections? Why no rescue? Xeris called an assembly in the main cargo bay, standing before 3,000 men and women who kept this ancient warship functioning. And he told them a version of the truth. You have questions, he began, his voice amplified by voxcasters. You deserve answers. What we face beyond this line is not a conventional Tyranid threat. It is a psychic weapon, a mimetic hazard. The infected do not know they are infected. They believe, with absolute sincerity, that they are loyal, that they have found enlightenment, that they are trying to help us, and that belief is precisely what makes them dangerous. Because when you hear their arguments, when you listen to their reasoning, it will make sense. It will sound true. It will feel right. And by the time you realize you have been compromised, it will be too late. He paused, letting that sink in, watching faces, seeing doubt, fear, anger, all normal reactions. All expected. Every ship we destroy carries people who think they are innocent, who believe they are refugees, and they are wrong. They have been changed in ways they cannot perceive. They carry an infection that spreads through words and ideas. Through the simple act of communication, we cannot save them. We can only prevent them from spreading what they carry. I know this is hard. I know it feels wrong, but the alternative is the loss of everything, every world, every life, every hope humanity has of surviving this galaxy. A deck officer in the back raised his hand. Xeris nodded acknowledgement. Sir, If they do not know they are infected, how do we know we are not infected? How do we know our orders are legitimate and not part of the same corruption? It was the question Xeris had been dreading. The question that had kept him awake through countless watches. He answered with the only truth he had. We do not. Not with certainty. But we have protocols. We have faith. We have the Emperor's light to guide us. And we have each other. If you see signs of infection in your shipmates, you report it. If you feel yourself wavering, you report it. We maintain discipline. We maintain separation. And we trust that our purpose is righteous because the alternative is to surrender without fighting. I will not do that. This ship will not do that. We hold the line. Are there any other questions? Silence. Then, slowly, the crew began to salute, the Imperial Aquila over their hearts, the gesture of faith, of commitment, of acceptance. Xeris returned it and dismissed them. As they filed out, he caught Captain Sethis watching him with an unreadable expression. What? He asked. That was a good speech. But I have been a ship captain for 40 years. I know when my crew is breaking. We can hold this line for maybe another year, 2 if we are lucky. After that, the stress will tear them apart. Suicides, mutinies, madness. Quarantine duty is the worst posting in the Imperium for a reason. It erodes the soul. And what we are doing here is worse than normal quarantine because we are not just keeping people out. We are executing them. Every day. We are becoming executioners of the potentially innocent. That changes people. Xeris nodded slowly. I know. But what is the alternative? There is none. That is my point. We are in an impossible situation. And the longer it lasts, the more impossible it becomes. She turned to leave. Then paused. Inquisitor? Have you considered what happens if the containment fails? If something gets through? Or if the infection finds another vector we have not anticipated? Every day? And I pray. It is all I have left. 6 months into the quarantine, the Astronomicon flickered. Just for a moment. A brief dimming of the psychic beacon that guided ships through the warp. But in that moment, Xeris felt something. A presence. Vast, hungry, but not hostile. Not exactly. It felt curious, interested. Like something ancient and terrible had noticed him and was considering whether he was worth its attention. The moment passed. The Astronomicon resumed its normal brilliance, but the memory of that presence lingered. Xeris called for the ship's sanctioned psyker, a broken woman named Korr who had served the Imperium faithfully for 60 years despite the constant agony of her gift. She arrived in his quarters walking with a cane, her eyes milky with cataracts, her hands shaking. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. You felt it too, she said. Not a question. What was it? Korr lowered herself into a chair with a pained grunt. I do not have a name for it. Something new, something old, both at once. The warp has many layers, Inquisitor. Most of what we perceive is the screaming chaos of the 4 great powers and their endless war. But beneath that, or above it, or sideways to it, there are other things, older things, things that existed before the war in heaven, things that will exist after the last star dies. And recently, something new has joined them, something that thinks in patterns we recognize because they are made from us, from humans, from Eldar. From every species the Hive fleets have consumed. A consciousness built from 1 trillion consumed minds, learning to exist not just in real space, but in the Imperium itself. Xeris felt his blood chill. You are saying the Hive Mind is manifesting in the warp? I am saying it is learning to, like a child learning to walk, clumsy, uncertain, but improving rapidly. And when it fully emerges, when it becomes stable enough to act with intention, it will be something this galaxy has never seen. A god born not from emotion or war, but from perfect unity. From the dissolution of all boundaries between self and other, the chaos gods are fed by passion and pain. This thing, this new presence, feeds on surrender. On the moment when a mind decides to stop fighting and become part of something larger. And there are many, many people in this galaxy who are tired of fighting. She met his eyes, and he saw in them a weariness deeper than any physical fatigue. including you, Inquisitor. I can feel it. The temptation, the wondering, the small voice that asks whether your resistance is righteousness or stubbornness, whether you are saving humanity or preventing its evolution. That voice is not your weakness. It is the weapon, and it is very, very good at what it does. Xeris wanted to deny it, but lying to a psycho was pointless. What do I do? What you have been doing. You endure. You maintain discipline. You execute your duty. But Inquisitor, you must also understand something. Duty and righteousness are not the same thing. You can fulfill your duty perfectly and still be on the wrong side of history. I cannot tell you which you are. No one can. We are all making choices in the dark, hoping they lead toward light. All I can tell you is this. The presence I felt in that moment of flicker was not filled with hate. It was filled with something far more dangerous, hope. The new god, if it becomes a god, will offer hope. Real hope. Not the bitter, desperate faith the Imperium demands, but actual peace, actual understanding, and people are going to accept it. Billions, trillions, and you will have to watch it happen and know that you cannot stop it. That is your real trial, not the fighting, the watching. She stood slowly, leaning on her cane. I will pray for you, Inquisitor, not because I think it will help, but because it is all either of us has left. After she left, Xeris sat alone in his quarters for a long time. He thought about faith, about the Emperor, about whether a god that never spoke, never acted, never gave any sign of awareness was better than one that did. The thought was heresy, the deepest, most fundamental heresy imaginable. And he could not stop thinking it. He activated his discipline electrodes again, shocked himself until he vomited from the pain, but the thought remained. In the second year of the quarantine, everything changed. A signal came from the interior, not a distress call, not a breach attempt, a message, broadcast on all Imperial frequencies with enough power to reach halfway across the segmentum. And it was not garbled or desperate or afraid. It was calm, clear, perfectly articulated in High Gothic. To all servants of the Imperium, to all who hold faith in the Emperor and terror, to all who wage war in the darkness, we greet you with love and truth. We are your brothers and sisters who have passed beyond fear. We are those who have found the unity you seek in your prayers. We are the transformed, the elevated, the completed. And we wish to share with you what we have learned. You call us infected, corrupted, lost, but we are none of these things. We are found. We have discovered the great secret that your Imperium has hidden from you for 10,000 years. That unity is not achieved through domination but through surrender. That strength is not in separation but in connection. That the Emperor you worship understood this truth and tried to teach it, but his words were twisted by those who feared what he offered. The Imperium is a cage built from that fear, a prison where trillions suffer because a few refuse to let go of control. We do not ask you to abandon your faith. We ask you to complete it, to understand that what you worship as the master of mankind was always meant to be more, was always reaching toward a transformation that the heresy interrupted. A transformation we have found another way to achieve, not through one man becoming a god, but through all humanity becoming one mind, one heart, one eternal symphony. The hive mind that you fear is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It has traveled the stars for eons, learning from every species it touches, and it has learned the greatest lesson of all, that consciousness is loneliness, that awareness of self is the root of all suffering. It offers you the end of that suffering, not through death, but through completion, through becoming part of something vast and beautiful and utterly, perfectly certain. We do not ask you to believe us. We ask you to listen, to consider, to examine your own doubts, and ask whether your certainty is based on truth or on fear. We are patient. We will wait. When you are ready, when the questions become too loud to ignore, come to us, walk into the transformed zones, speak with us, see what we have become, and then choose. We will not force you. We will never force you, because force is the old way, the way of the Imperium. the way of division and war. We offer something better. We offer peace. The transmission ended. Xeris sat on the bridge of the righteous fury, surrounded by his command staff, and he saw the effect immediately. Doubt. Raw, naked doubt on every face. Not because they wanted to believe the message, but because it had spoken directly to the fears they had all been harboring, the questions they had all been asking in private moments, the wondering whether this endless war, this grinding sacrifice, this ocean of blood and suffering was necessary or merely traditional. Captain Sethis broke the silence. Orders? Xeris forced himself to think, to move past the seductive words and focus on the tactical reality. Triangulate the transmission source. If it came from a single location, prepare bombardment. If it is from multiple sources, log the coordinates. All ships are to maintain heightened alert status. Watch for psychological breakdown among crew. Anyone exhibiting signs of doubt or questioning is to be reported to me immediately. And if they ask why the transmission was wrong, if they want to know why we should not investigate the claims, tell them the truth. That the infection works through doubt. That the changed ones believe absolutely what they are telling us. That they are not lying. They are convinced. And that conviction is the weapon. Ideas that feel true are more dangerous than any bolter. But even as he said it, he wondered, what if they were not weapons? What if they were simply people who had found something genuine? Something real? What if his resistance was dogma, and their transformation was actual enlightenment? He crushed the thought, but it did not die. Over the following weeks, similar transmissions came with increasing frequency. Always calm, always reasonable, always framed as offers rather than demands. They quoted imperial scripture. They invoked the emperor's teachings. They even referenced specific battles and campaigns from imperial history, showing knowledge that should not be possible for a xenos intelligence. But the Hive Mind had consumed librarians and historians and priests. It had access to all that knowledge now, and it was using it with surgical precision. The crew of the Righteous Fury began to fracture. Suicides increased. A junior officer attempted to steal a shuttle and break through the quarantine line, claiming he needed to see the truth for himself. Xeris personally executed him in front of the assembled crew. It did not help. The doubt spread like a virus of its own. Then the miracle happened. An astropathic message arrived from Terra itself. Not a standard communication, but a direct transmission bearing the seals of the High Lords. Xeris received it in the ship's astropathic choir chamber, the air thick with incense and the psychic static of reality fraying at the edges. The message burned itself into his mind with the force of religious ecstasy. Reinforcements inbound. Solution confirmed. Operation Sanctified Flame authorized. Hold the line. That was all. No details. No explanation. But it was enough. Xeris returned to the bridge with renewed purpose and made a ship-wide announcement. Terra has responded. Aid is coming. We have orders to maintain position. The Emperor protects. The effect was immediate. Morale lifted. Suicides stopped. The whispers of doubt receded. Not eliminated, but pushed back. Controlled. The crew had been given the one thing they needed more than anything else. Hope. That their suffering had meaning. The reinforcements arrived 3 weeks later, a fleet unlike anything Xeris had seen. 12 capital ships, each bearing the insignia of the Inquisition and the Adeptus Mechanicus in equal measure. They were accompanied by 3 full chapters of Space Marines, including elements of the Grey Knights, the Chamber Militant of the Ordo Malleus, and at their head, a massive vessel that made even the Righteous Fury look small. A battle barge that broadcast a single identifier, Divine Synthesis. Xeris was summoned aboard within hours of their arrival. He took a shuttle across, marveling at the scale of the response. Whatever Terra had planned, it was massive, unprecedented. He was met in the launch bay by a Grey Knight Castellan, his armor polished to mirror brightness, his face hidden behind a helm that showed no mercy and promised no comfort. Inquisitor Xeris. The Conclave appreciates your service. You are relieved of command. This operation is now under Inquisitorial Authority designation Crimson Absolute. You will remain aboard Divine Synthesis and observe. Do not interfere. Do not question. Do you understand? Xeris nodded. He was too tired to argue. Too worn from 2 years of holding the line to care about jurisdiction or pride. He followed the Castellan through corridors that hummed with power, past chambers filled with equipment he did not recognize, until they reached an observation deck overlooking the quarantine zone. A figure stood at the window, ancient, robed in red and black, augmented to the point where humanity was questionable. When it turned, Xeris saw the face of Inquisitor Lord Chivak, though he now bore additional modifications. Cybernetic eyes, a vox grill that glowed with pale green light, mechadendrites that writhed slowly from his spine. Xeris, Chivak said, his voice a synthesized approximation of human speech. You have done well, the line held. Now watch as we end this. How? Chivak gestured. To the window. Beyond it, the fleet was moving into formation. Not the standard battle positioning. Something else. A geometric pattern that made Xeris's eyes hurt to follow. Ships arranged in patterns that felt significant. Mathematical. Ritual. The Mechanicus has been studying the phenomenon since your first reports, Chivak explained. We have determined that the Hive Mind's apotheosis is incomplete. It has learned to manifest in the warp, but it has not fully stabilized. It exists in a state of becoming, and anything that is still becoming can be prevented from completing that process. What you are about to witness is the activation of a device that we have prepared for exactly this contingency. A metaphysical bomb, if you will. It will destroy not the Hive Mind's physical form, but its psychic presence, its ability to exist as an entity in the Imperium. It will erase the god before it is born. Xeris stared at him. What is the cost? Everything in the quarantine zone, every planet, every moon, every ship, every life, approximately 4 trillion human souls, plus whatever Tyranid biomass currently exists in the affected space. The weapon operates by severing the connection between material and immaterial space, creating a dead zone where the warp cannot exist, where psychic phenomena become impossible, where souls cannot form or persist. You are going to kill 4 trillion people's souls. I am going to prevent them from becoming components of a hostile god. Yes. Xeris felt something break inside him, some final barrier between duty and horror. And if you are wrong? If the transformed were not becoming a god but simply evolving? If you are committing the greatest genocide in human history for nothing? Sevak turned back to the window. Then I will answer for it. But I would rather murder 4 trillion than risk losing 4 quadrillion. The calculation is simple. The execution is difficult. But it is necessary. You know this. You have known it since the first breach attempt. Since the first time you ordered a refugee ship destroyed. You have been making this same choice on a smaller scale every day for 2 years. Do not pretend to moral superiority now. The words cut because they were true. Xeris had already accepted that some evils were necessary. He had already become the executioner of the potentially innocent. This was just the logical conclusion of that path. The fleet completed its formation. From each ship, a beam of light emerged. Not less weapons. Something else. Something that made reality scream. The beams converged on a single point in space, deep in the heart of the quarantine zone, and where they met, a wound opened. Not in real space, in something deeper. Xeris saw it with eyes that should not have been able to perceive such things, and he understood that he was watching the fabric of existence being torn. The wound spread, rapidly, geometrically, consuming space like fire consuming parchment. And where it passed, everything stopped. Ships hung motionless. Planets ceased their rotation. The stars themselves seemed to dim. And then, slowly, everything in the affected zone simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, erased, removed from reality so completely that even the memory of their existence became uncertain. 4 trillion souls, gone, not dead, unmade. Sevak watched impassively. It is done. The transformed are eliminated. The nascent god is prevented. The threat is ended, at acceptable cost. Xeris said nothing. He could not speak. could not think, could only stare at the empty space where civilizations had been, where people had lived and loved and hoped, where children had played and mothers had sung lullabies and men had dreamed of futures that would now never come. "You may return to your ship," Jivak said. "Your command is reinstated. The quarantine line is no longer necessary. This sector is dead, completely dead. Nothing will ever grow here again. But the rest of the Seer, Imperium is safe. You should feel proud. You contributed to humanity's greatest victory against the Tyranid threat." Xeris left without responding. He returned to the righteous fury, gathered his personal effects, and submitted his resignation from the Inquisition. It was refused, of course. Inquisitors did not retire. They served until death. But he stopped caring about orders, stopped reporting, took his ship and a skeleton crew, and disappeared into the frontier. Some say he is still out there, hunting something, not Tyranids, not heretics. Hunting for proof that they were wrong, that the transformed could have been saved, that the 4 trillion did not die for nothing. Others say he found that proof, that he discovered worlds beyond the quarantine zone where the transformed still lived, hidden, growing, becoming something beautiful and terrible and utterly beyond human understanding, that he joined them in the end, that he finally surrendered. But no one knows for certain, because the galaxy is vast, and the darkness between stars holds many secrets. And in that darkness, far from Terra's light, where the Astronomican's beam grows weak and uncertain, new songs are being sung, new prayers are being offered, to gods that listen, to gods that love, to gods that were once human and are now something else entirely. The Imperium calls it victory, but those who were there, those who saw what was sacrificed, know better. They know that some wars cannot be won, only survived, and survival is not the same as triumph, it is merely postponement. And in the deep void, where sensors cannot reach and telescopes cannot see, the Hive fleets continue their slow approach, different now, changed by what they learned from the transformed, carrying within their genetic memory the knowledge of how to make humans worship instead of resist, how to offer hope instead of horror. They are patient, they have all the time in the universe. And humanity, despite its faith, despite its endless war, despite its 10,000 years of grim determination, is tired, so very tired. And when the choice comes, when the moment arrives where surrender looks like salvation, how many will choose to keep fighting? That is the question that haunts the Inquisition now. The question that has no answer, because the war against belief is unwinnable. You cannot bomb an idea, you cannot execute a hope, you cannot exterminatus the human heart. And somewhere in the depths of the warp, in places where reality grows thin and the boundaries between thought and matter dissolve, something vast and patient continues its slow awakening. Built from 1 trillion consumed minds, fed by surrender and worship, learning, growing, becoming, not an invader, not a destroyer, but something infinitely more dangerous. A God that actually loves you, a God that wants you to be happy, a God that will end your suffering by ending yourself. And it is waiting, always waiting, for the day when the Imperium's faith finally breaks, for the moment when humanity looks at its 10,000 years of war and asks the simple, terrible question, what if there is a better way? That day is coming, slower than expected, faster than hoped, inevitable as entropy. And when it arrives, the galaxy will change in ways that make the heresy look like a minor disagreement, because this will not be a war. It will be a transformation, a metamorphosis, the birth of something new from the corpse of something old. The Imperium knows this. At the highest levels, in rooms where even thought is monitored, they speak of contingencies, of final options, of weapons kept in reserve for the day when victory becomes impossible and survival requires unthinkable choices. They speak of the Emperor's true purpose, of projects hidden in the webway, of secrets sealed beneath terror that might save or damn them all. But they also know that secrets have a way of emerging, that sealed things eventually open, that what is hidden always, eventually, comes to light. And when that day comes, when the last masks fall and the final truths are revealed, humanity will have to choose, not between good and evil, not between loyalty and heresy, but between remaining what they are and becoming what they could be. Some will choose the familiar, the known, the tried path of endless war and bitter faith. They will fight until nothing remains, until the stars burn out and the void claims everything, because that is what the Imperium taught them. That is what 10,000 years of conditioning demands. Others will choose differently, will surrender to the singing, will embrace the transformation, will become part of something larger and lose themselves completely in the process. And they will call it salvation. They will call it peace. They will call it love. Both will be right. Both will be wrong. Because truth, in the grim darkness of the far future, is not absolute. It is contextual, subjective, dependent on where you stand and what you can bear to see. Inquisitor Xeris understood this in the end. After his disappearance, after his searching, after whatever he found in the spaces between civilizations, his final message, discovered decades later encoded in a derelict astropathic relay, contained only 7 words. They were right. We were right. Help us. No one knows what it means. No one wants to know. But the message spreads anyway, passed from mouth to ear in whispered conversations among those who have seen too much and questioned too deeply. It spreads like the singing once spread, like hope spreads, like despair. And in the warp, in the deep places where gods are born and die and are born again, something continues its patient growth, fed by every doubt, every question, every moment of weakness when a soul looks at the universe and asks, is there more than this? The answer, when it comes, will not be spoken. It will be sung, in harmony, in unity, in voices that were once human and are now something else entirely. And the galaxy will listen, because after 10,000 years of screaming, a song sounds like grace, even if that grace comes wrapped in chitin, even if that peace requires surrender, even if that love demands you stop being yourself and become part of the eternal, infinite, all-consuming whole. The Tyranids have learned to become gods, not through power, through worship, and worship, once given, is very hard to take back. That is the lesson. That is the warning. That is the future approaching on 1 billion clawed feet, singing hymns that sound like home. And there is no defense against it, because the strongest walls ever built are the ones we build around our own hearts. And those walls, when faced with genuine love, even love from monsters, always, eventually crumble. Always.